Dr. Sarah Chen never expected her research trip to the Outer Rim would end with her floating in a damaged escape pod, watching her transport ship burn in the void. The pirates had come out of nowhere, their sleek black vessels cutting through space like sharks through water. Her ship, a simple civilian research vessel, never stood a chance. The attack happened so fast that Sarah barely made it to an escape pod before the main reactor went critical. Now she drifted in the cold darkness between stars, her pod's emergency beacon flashing weakly into the endless night. The life support system hummed quietly, but she knew it wouldn't last more than 3 days. Maybe 4 if she was lucky. Sarah was a xenobiologist, not a soldier. She had spent her career studying alien plant life on remote worlds, far from the wars and conflicts that plagued the galaxy. Her work was peaceful, important, but hardly the stuff of adventure stories. She collected samples, wrote reports, and published papers that maybe a dozen people would ever read. She never hurt anyone, never carried weapons, never posed a threat to anybody. The pirates who destroyed her ship probably didn't even know she existed. They saw a research vessel with valuable equipment and took what they wanted before blowing it apart. To them, she was just collateral damage, another casualty in their endless cycle of violence and greed. Hours passed. Sarah tried to stay calm, conserving oxygen and power. She had sent out distress signals, but this was deep space, far from any major shipping lanes. The chances of rescue were almost zero. She thought about her parents back on Earth, her sister in the Mars colonies, the research team waiting for her data on Kepler 442b. They would never know what happened to her. On the second day, when hope had nearly died completely, Sarah's proximity alarms began to chirp. Something was approaching her pod. She pressed her face against the small porthole, straining to see what was coming. At first she saw nothing but stars. Then slowly, a shape began to emerge from the darkness. It was unlike any ship she had ever seen. The vessel was organic-looking, with smooth curves and flowing lines that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. It was beautiful in a way that human ships never were, as if it had been grown rather than built. Sarah had read about the Zephyrian Commonwealth in xenological journals, but she had never seen one of their bioships in person. The Zephyrian ship moved with impossible grace, extending what looked like tendrils toward her pod. Sarah felt a gentle vibration as the tendrils made contact, and then her pod was being drawn toward the larger vessel. An iris-like opening appeared in the ship's hull, dilating to allow her pod inside. Sarah had never met a Zephyrian before. She knew they were one of the more peaceful species in the galaxy, known for their advanced biotechnology and their philosophy of harmony with nature. They rarely ventured into human space, preferring to stay in their own quiet corner of the galaxy. What was one of their ships doing out here? The pod settled into what seemed to be a docking bay, though it looked more like the inside of a vast flower than any mechanical structure. The walls pulsed with soft bioluminescent patterns and the air smelled of growing things. Sarah checked her suit's atmospheric readings. The air outside was breathable with even more oxygen than Earth normal. A section of the wall dilated and 3 Zephyrians entered the bay. They were tall and slender, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer with its own light. Their faces were humanoid but elongated, with large dark eyes that held an ancient wisdom. They moved with a flowing grace that made Sarah think of dancers or poets. The lead Zephyrian approached her pod and placed what Sarah assumed was their hand against the transparent aluminum window. Their touch was gentle, almost reverent. They spoke in their own language, a series of musical tones that somehow conveyed meaning even though Sarah couldn't understand the words. Concern, relief. Welcome. Sarah activated her pod's external speakers. Thank you, she said, hoping her universal translator would work. Thank you for saving me. The Zephyrians tilted their heads in unison, their large eyes blinking slowly. The leader spoke again, and this time Sarah's translator caught some of the meaning. Small one, hurt, safe now. Over the next several hours, the Zephyrians tended to Sarah with a care that brought tears to her eyes. They fed her foods that tasted like sunshine and rain, gave her water that was purer than anything she had ever drunk, and provided her with a sleeping alcove that adjusted itself to her body like a living thing. They asked for nothing in return, seemed to expect no payment or reward. When Sarah tried to explain who she was, where she came from, the Zephyrians listened with patient attention. They seemed fascinated by her research, by her peaceful mission to study and understand alien life. Through the translator, they told her about their own world, about forests that sang and oceans that dreamed, about a civilization built on the principle that all life was sacred. "Why did you save me?" Sarah asked on her third day aboard their ship. "You don't know me." "I'm not important. I'm just a scientist." The Zephyrian, who had become her primary caretaker, whose name sounded like wind through trees, looked at her with those deep, ancient eyes. "All life is important, small one. To save one is to save all. This is the way of harmony." The bioship changed course, heading toward the nearest human outpost. It would take them 2 weeks to reach Frontier Station, but Sarah didn't mind. She spent her time learning about Zephyrian culture, sharing her own knowledge of human customs and Earth's history. The Zephyrians were endlessly curious about everything, from human art to human food to the way humans formed families and communities. What struck Sarah most was their genuine kindness. They had risked their own safety to rescue a stranger, asked for nothing in return, and treated her like an honored guest rather than a burden. In a galaxy often marked by conflict and mistrust between species, the Zephyrians stood apart as something pure and good. As Frontier Station grew larger in the view screen, Sarah felt a sadness she hadn't expected. She would miss these gentle beings, their beautiful ship, their philosophy of harmony and peace. She had experienced something special here, something that would change how she saw the universe forever. The Zephyrians prepared a small shuttle to take her to the station. Before she left, the wind-named Zephyrian gave her a small gift, a seed from their homeworld, pulsing with soft blue light. "For your garden," they said through the translator. "So you remember. So harmony grows." Commander Jake Morrison was having his morning coffee when the message from Frontier Station came through. It was marked as routine civilian traffic, the kind of report that usually dealt with shipping schedules or minor diplomatic incidents. He almost didn't read it immediately, but something about the subject line caught his attention. "Rescue of human civilian by Zephyrian vessel." Morrison had been stationed at the Earth Defense Command for 15 years. He had seen reports of pirate attacks, alien first contacts, and everything in between. But this one was different. As he read through Dr. Sarah Chen's detailed account of her rescue, something began to burn in his chest. The report was clinical, professional. Sarah had filed it according to standard protocols, documenting every detail of her capture, rescue, and treatment by the Zephyrian crew. She wrote about their kindness, their refusal to accept any payment, their genuine care for a complete stranger. She described their philosophy of harmony, their belief that all life was sacred, their willingness to risk their own safety to save one human they had never met. Morrison finished reading and immediately forwarded the report to his superior, Admiral Elena Vasquez. Within an hour, he was sitting in her office on the top floor of the Luna Defense Complex, watching Earth turn slowly through the floor-to-ceiling windows. 17 hours, Admiral Vasquez said, not looking up from her tablet. That's how long they spent searching for her pod after they detected her distress signal. 17 hours of active scanning in pirate-infested space, risking their own ship and crew for one human civilian. Morrison nodded. And they asked for nothing in return. No payment, no trade agreements, no political favors. They just saved her because it was the right thing to do. Vasquez finally looked up, her dark eyes intense. "When was the last time someone did something like that for us, Jake? When was the last time any alien species put themselves at risk to help humanity without expecting something in return?" Morrison thought about it. In his 15 years of service, he had dealt with dozens of alien species. The Centauri collective that charged premium rates for their medical technology. The Vegan trade union that negotiated every deal down to the last credit. The Andromedan empire that barely acknowledged human existence. Even the species that called themselves allies usually wanted something in exchange for their cooperation. "Never," he said finally. "This is the first time." Vasquez stood and walked to the window, her hands clasped behind her back. "Dr. Chen says they have a philosophy that all life is sacred. That to save one is to save all. Do you know what our philosophy is, Jake?" Morrison remained silent, sensing this was a rhetorical question. "We protect our own," Vasquez continued. "Humanity has learned, sometimes the hard way, that we can only count on ourselves. We've built our entire defense strategy around that principle, but these Zephyrians, They saved one of ours without hesitation, without calculation, without any thought of reward. She turned back to Morrison. I'm calling an emergency session of the Defense Council. We need to discuss this. The Defense Council meeting was unlike any Morrison had ever attended. Admiral Vasquez presented Dr. Chen's report to the 12-member council, and the reaction was immediate and unanimous. These aliens had done something unprecedented in human experience. They had acted with pure altruism toward a human being. The question, said Counselor Williams, is how we respond. This cannot go unacknowledged. We could send a diplomatic thank you note, suggested Counselor Park. Standard protocol for this type of incident. The room fell silent. Morrison could see the expressions on the council members' faces. A diplomatic note felt inadequate, almost insulting given what the Zephyrians had done. No, Admiral Vasquez said firmly. A note is what you send when someone does you a small favor. These beings risked their lives to save one of ours. They spent nearly 3 weeks ensuring she was safe and comfortable. They asked for nothing and expected nothing. A thank you note is not enough. Counselor Martinez leaned forward. What are you suggesting, Admiral? Vasquez pulled up a star chart showing the Zephyrian home system. It was in a remote part of the galaxy, far from major trade routes or strategic locations. The Zephyrians kept to themselves, rarely interacting with other species unless approached directly. I'm suggesting we show them what human gratitude really looks like, Vasquez said. I'm suggesting we demonstrate that humanity knows how to honor those who honor us. The debate that followed lasted for 6 hours. Some council members worried about the cost, others about the diplomatic implications. What would other alien species think if humanity made such a grand gesture? Would it set a precedent they couldn't afford to maintain? But Morrison watched Admiral Vasquez throughout the debate, and he could see her conviction only growing stronger. This wasn't about politics or strategy or diplomatic maneuvering. This was about something more fundamental, the human capacity for gratitude and loyalty taken to its logical extreme. Finally, Counselor Thompson raised the question that everyone was thinking. Admiral, exactly what kind of response are you proposing? Vasquez smiled, and Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. He had seen that smile before, usually right before the Admiral did something that would be talked about for decades. I'm proposing we send them the Fifth Fleet, she said. The room erupted in discussion. The Fifth Fleet was one of Earth's premier naval formations, consisting of 57 ships including 3 dreadnoughts, 12 battlecruisers, and dozens of support vessels. It was a force capable of projecting power across multiple star systems, the kind of fleet that could change the outcome of wars. You want to send a battle fleet to thank them for rescuing one civilian? Counselor Park asked, his voice rising in disbelief. Not a battle fleet, Vasquez corrected. A thank you fleet. Every ship loaded with gifts, cultural exchanges, scientific data, art, music, literature. Everything that makes humanity worth saving. Morrison felt his heart beginning to race. It was insane. It was unprecedented. It was the most magnificently human response he could imagine. They saved one of ours, Admiral Vasquez continued, her voice growing stronger. In return, we're going to show them the entire civilization they helped preserve. We're going to give them a gift that matches the magnitude of what they did for us. The vote was closer than Morrison expected, but it passed. 7 votes in favor, 5 opposed. Within hours, orders were being transmitted across the Sol system. The Fifth Fleet would assemble at Luna Base and prepare for a journey to the Zephyrian home system. Not as conquerors or negotiators, but as grateful human beings bearing the thanks of their entire species. As Morrison left the meeting, he couldn't help but smile. Other species might think humanity was crazy for sending an entire fleet to thank someone for rescuing one person. They would probably be right. But that was exactly the point. Humanity didn't do things by halves, especially when it came to loyalty and gratitude. The Zephyrians had shown kindness to one human. Now they were about to discover what happened when that human's entire species decided to return the favor. The Luna shipyards had never seen anything like it. Within 72 hours of the Defense Council's decision, ships began arriving from across the Sol system. Not just military vessels, but civilian craft, research ships, cultural exchange vessels, and cargo haulers loaded with gifts from every human world. Captain Lisa Rodriguez stood on the observation deck of the dreadnought Harmony, watching the controlled chaos unfolding around her. Her ship had been selected as the flagship for what the media was already calling the Gratitude Fleet. The irony of the name wasn't lost on her. Harmony was a ship built for war, now repurposed for the most peaceful mission in human history. Captain, her executive officer, Commander Park approached with a tablet full of manifests. The latest inventory reports are coming in. You're not going to believe what people are sending. Rodriguez took the tablet and scrolled through the lists. The sheer variety was staggering. The entire Vienna Philharmonic had volunteered to make the journey, along with their instruments and a complete archive of human classical music. The Louvre had contributed copies of humanity's greatest artworks. Universities from Earth, Mars, and the outer colonies were sending their finest scholars and their most precious research. But it wasn't just the official contributions that amazed her. Individual humans had somehow learned about the mission and were sending personal gifts. A grandmother from New Tokyo had sent her prize-winning flower seeds. A group of children from the Luna colonies had created hand-drawn pictures showing Earth and Zephyria as friends. A master chef from the floating cities of Venus had actually requested passage so he could personally prepare meals for the Zephyrians. "There's more," Commander Park said, barely suppressing a grin. "The Agricultural Ministry wants to send samples of every food crop humanity has ever cultivated. The Historical Society is contributing complete databases of human literature, poetry, and philosophy. And get this, the Ministry of Education wants to send teachers who can establish a permanent cultural exchange program." Rodriguez shook her head in amazement. "How many people are we talking about?" "Current count is just over 12,000 civilian volunteers, plus the 30,000 fleet personnel. The logistics team is having nightmares trying to figure out life support for everyone. 12,000 volunteers. Rodriguez had commanded military missions with fewer people. All of these humans had dropped their normal lives to travel to an alien world they knew nothing about, just to say thank you to a species that had saved one of their own. Admiral Vasquez's voice echoed through the shipyard's communication system. "All department heads to Conference Room Alpha. Briefing begins in 10 minutes. The conference room aboard the Harmony was packed. Representatives from every ship in the fleet, civilian coordinators, cultural attachés, and logistics officers filled every available seat. Rodriguez had commanded fleets before, but never one with such a diverse mix of people and purposes. Admiral Vasquez entered and the room fell silent. She looked around at the assembled crowd, her expression showing both pride and determination. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "in 72 hours we depart for the Zephyrian home system. This mission is unlike anything humanity has ever attempted. We are not going as conquerors, explorers, or negotiators. We are going as grateful neighbors." She activated a holographic display showing the fleet composition. 57 military vessels, each carrying cultural gifts and scientific exchanges. 43 civilian ships loaded with art, music, literature, and food. 12 research vessels with our finest scientists and scholars. 3 hospital ships offering advanced medical technology. And 1 very special cargo ship carrying something unique. The display zoomed in on a massive cargo vessel, easily the largest ship in the fleet. The Providence is carrying gifts from ordinary humans across the solar system. Personal letters, family photos, handmade crafts, children's drawings, musical instruments, recipe books, and 10,000 other items that represent who we are as a people. Dr. Sarah Chen's voice came from the back of the room. "Admiral, with respect, isn't this a bit much? I mean, they saved 1 person. 1 scientist who wasn't even particularly important in the grand scheme of things." Every head in the room turned toward her. Sarah had insisted on joining the mission despite being offered a comfortable research position back on Earth. She wanted to return to the beings who had saved her, to see them again and properly express her gratitude. Admiral Vasquez smiled. "Dr. Chen, that's exactly why we're doing this. To the Zephyrians, you weren't just 1 person or not particularly important. You were a life worth saving, worth risking themselves for, worth spending weeks caring for. They saw value in you that had nothing to do with your position or accomplishments." She gestured toward the fleet visible through the conference room windows. "This is how humanity responds when someone shows us that kind of respect for life. When someone demonstrates that level of selfless kindness, we don't send a card or a small gift. We send everything we have." Captain Rodriguez raised her hand. "Admiral, the other galactic powers are already asking questions. The Centauri Collective wants to know if this represents a military alliance. The Andromedan Empire is demanding to know why we're sending warships into neutral space. Let them ask, Vasquez replied firmly. When they see what we're actually doing, they'll understand. This isn't about military power or political maneuvering. This is about honor and gratitude taken to their logical conclusion. Commander Park stood up. Ma'am, we've received word that 17 alien governments have requested observer status for the mission. They want to send representatives to watch what we're doing. Vasquez raised an eyebrow. Approved. Let them see how humanity treats those who show us kindness. Maybe they'll learn something. The briefing continued for another hour, covering everything from cultural sensitivity protocols to gift distribution logistics. Every detail had been planned and replanned. The fleet carried translators fluent in Zephyrian musical language, xenobiologists who had studied their culture, and diplomats trained in their philosophy of harmony. But the most important cargo, Rodriguez realized, wasn't the art or the music or the scientific data. It was the 12,000 humans who had volunteered for this mission. Farmers and artists, soldiers and teachers, engineers and poets, all united by a simple desire to say thank you to a people who had shown kindness to one of their own. As the briefing ended and people began filing out, Rodriguez caught Admiral Vasquez's attention. Admiral, can I ask you something? Off the record? Vasquez nodded. Do you think we're crazy, sending this entire fleet, all these people and resources, just to say thank you? Vasquez looked out at the assembled ships, their hulls gleaming in the light of Luna's artificial suns. Captain, there are species in this galaxy who would step over a dying stranger without a second thought. There are others who would save that stranger, only if they could profit from it. But the Zephyrians saved Dr. Chen simply because it was the right thing to do. She turned back to Rodriguez. Maybe we are crazy. Maybe this is completely disproportionate and economically irrational, and diplomatically unprecedented. But you know what? I'd rather live in a universe where kindness is rewarded beyond all reasonable measure than one where it's barely acknowledged. Rodriguez nodded, understanding completely. This wasn't about rational responses or measured diplomacy. This was about the human heart writ large across the galaxy. It was about showing the universe that there was at least one species that understood the true value of compassion. As the Harmony's crew prepared for departure, Rodriguez received one final message. It was from Earth's Department of Education, and it contained lesson plans that teachers across human space were already implementing. Children from Mercury to Pluto were learning about the Zephyrians, about their rescue of Dr. Chen, and about the meaning of gratitude. The entire generation of human children would grow up knowing this story, understanding that kindness should be answered with kindness, and that saving one life was worthy of celebrating with the resources of an entire civilization. The Gratitude Fleet was ready to depart. The Zephyrian sensor operator's name translated roughly to Whisper, of Dawn Among Flowers, but her friends called her Dawn. She had been monitoring the deep space sensors for 3 cycles when something impossible appeared on her screens. Elder, she called softly, her voice carrying the harmonious tones that her people used for urgent but non-threatening communications. I am detecting a large formation approaching our system. Elder Harmony in the growing light glided over to Dawn's station, his ancient form moving with the fluid grace typical of their species. He had lived for over 200 standard years and had seen many strange things in the galaxy, but nothing had prepared him for what appeared on the display. How many vessels? He asked, his own voice taking on the deeper tones of concern. Dawn's slender fingers danced across her bio-interface, the living controls responding to her touch like flower petals. The sensors are having difficulty processing the count. Elder, the formation is extensive. More Zephyrians began gathering around the sensor station as word spread through their orbital monitoring facility. The readings were unlike anything in their historical records. Not since the great migration wars of the ancient past had so many ships moved together through space. Could it be the Andromedan fleet? Asked Riversong at Twilight, the station's military liaison. They have been expanding aggressively in this sector. Dawn manipulated her controls, trying to get clearer readings. The energy signatures are wrong for Andromedan vessels. These ships appear to be... Wait. She paused, her large, dark eyes widening in surprise. Elder, I recognize some of these signatures. They match the human vessel databases we studied after the rescue incident. A ripple of confusion passed through the assembled Zephyrians. 3 months ago, One of their bioships had rescued a human scientist from a damaged escape pod. It had been a simple act of compassion, the kind of thing any decent being would do when encountering a life in danger. They had delivered the human to her people and thought nothing more of it. Elder Harmony leaned closer to the display. "Are you certain these are human vessels?" "The quantum resonance patterns are unmistakable," Dawn confirmed. "But Elder, there are so many of them. Our databases suggest that this represents a significant portion of the human military fleet." The implication sent a chill through the monitoring station. Had they somehow offended the humans? Was this a military response to their rescue of the scientist? But that made no sense. They had done nothing but help. "Open a communication channel," Elder Harmony commanded, his voice taking on the formal tones of first contact protocol. "Let us discover their intentions before assuming the worst." The communication came through on standard galactic frequencies, translated into their musical language by sophisticated software. The voice that spoke was female, carrying the strange flat tones that characterized human speech. "Zephyrian Monitoring Station, this is Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Earth Defense Forces. We come in peace and with grateful hearts. We request permission to enter your system to express humanity's gratitude for your rescue of Dr. Sarah Chen." Dawn looked at Elder Harmony in confusion. "Gratitude? For one small act of compassion?" "Admiral Vasquez," Elder Harmony responded, "we welcome peaceful visitors to our system. However, our sensors indicate you travel with a substantial military formation. Surely such force is unnecessary for a diplomatic mission." There was a pause before the human admiral responded, and when she did, Dawn could detect something unusual in her voice patterns, what humans might call amusement. "Elder, I understand your concern. Please be assured that we come only with gifts and friendship. The size of our fleet reflects the magnitude of our gratitude, not any hostile intent. We have brought representatives from every human world to thank your people properly." As the human formation drew closer, the true scope of their fleet became apparent. Dawn's instruments counted over 100 vessels of various sizes, from massive dreadnoughts to small cultural exchange ships. It was a fleet capable of conquering star systems, yet their communications spoke only of gratitude and gift-giving. "Elder," Dawn whispered, "what manner of beings responds to a simple rescue with such a massive undertaking?" Elder Harmony's expression showed the deep thoughtfulness that came with centuries of life. "Perhaps, young Dawn, we are about to learn something important about our human neighbors." Within hours, the news had spread across Zephyria. The Global Council convened in emergency session, their biochambers pulsing with the bioluminescent patterns that indicated intense debate. Some members urged caution. Such a massive fleet could be a threat regardless of their stated intentions. Others pointed out that the humans had done nothing aggressive, that their communications remained peaceful and respectful. The decisive moment came when Fleet Singer Azure Wand Through Leaves, who had commanded the bioship that rescued Dr. Chen, addressed the council. "Council members," she sang in the formal harmonies of testimony, "I interacted with this human called Sarah for many days. She spoke often of her people, of their loyalty to one another, of their capacity for both great kindness and great fury when their own are threatened. But she also spoke of their gratitude, their need to reciprocate kindness with kindness." Azure Wind paused, her form shimmering with the patterns that indicated deep memory. "I believe this fleet is not a threat but a gift, a demonstration of something we have rarely seen in the galaxy, a species that honors those who show them compassion." The Council's decision was unanimous. The human fleet would be welcomed to Zephyria with full honors. As the first human ships entered orbit around their world, Dawn and her colleagues watched in amazement. The vessels maintained perfect formation, their weapon systems clearly powered down, their communications filled with requests for permission rather than demands. These were not the actions of conquerors. The lead ship, identified as the Harmony, requested permission to send a small shuttle to the surface. Elder Harmony granted the request, and within hours, a delegation of humans was standing in the council chambers of Zephyria's capital BioCity. Dawn was among the Zephyrians selected to greet the human delegation. When she saw them in person for the first time, she was struck by how different they looked from the peaceful Zephyrians, yet how similar their expressions of respectful curiosity were. The human admiral was a small woman with dark skin and intense eyes. Beside her stood a human that Dawn recognized from the rescue records, Dr. Sarah Chen, the scientist they had saved. The human's face showed an expression that Dawn's studies of human behavior identified as joy, mixed with emotional distress. "Honored elders," Admiral Vasquez said through her translator, "I bring greetings from humanity and the heartfelt thanks of our entire species. Dr. Chen has told us of your kindness, your compassion, and your refusal to accept any payment for saving her life. We have come to offer a gift worthy of such selfless generosity." Elder Harmony responded with the formal harmonies of welcome. "Admiral Vasquez, we are honored by your presence, though puzzled by the scale of your response. We did only what any compassionate being would do when encountering a life in danger." Dr. Chen stepped forward, and Dawn could see moisture gathering in the human's eyes, the physiological response humans called tears. "Elder Harmony in the growing light, Fleet Singer Azure Wind Through Leaves, and all the crew of the bioship that saved me. You gave me my life back. You asked for nothing, expected nothing, and treated me with kindness I will never forget." The human paused, her voice taking on the deeper tones that indicated strong emotion. "My people wanted to show you what that means to us. What it means when someone values human life highly enough to risk their own safety for a stranger." Through the great bio windows of the council chamber, Dawn could see the human fleet hanging in orbit like a constellation of artificial stars. Over 100 ships, tens of thousands of humans all traveling across the galaxy to say thank you for one act of compassion. Dawn finally understood. This wasn't just a diplomatic mission or a cultural exchange. This was something much rarer and more precious. It was an entire species choosing to honor kindness with kindness, choosing to answer generosity with even greater generosity. The humans, she realized, were showing the galaxy what gratitude looked like when taken to its ultimate expression. Fleet Singer Azure Wind Through Leaves had seen many wonders in her long life, but nothing had prepared her for what the humans called Operation Gratitude. As she floated in the zero-gravity observation chamber of the human flagship Harmony, watching the systematic unloading of gifts, she felt something she had rarely experienced in her 2 centuries of existence: complete bewilderment. "Admiral Vasquez," she sang through the translator, "your people have brought enough gifts to supply our entire planet for cycles. This seems excessive for one small rescue." The human admiral smiled, an expression Azure Wind was learning to interpret as showing happiness mixed with something else, perhaps pride. "Fleet Singer Dr. Chen wasn't just one small rescue to us. She was one of ours. When someone shows kindness to one of ours, they show kindness to all of us." Through the chamber's biotransparent walls, Azure Wind could see the controlled chaos of the gift exchange. Human shuttles moved constantly between the fleet and Zephiria's orbital platforms, each one loaded with carefully cataloged presents. The variety was staggering and sometimes completely incomprehensible. Dr. Chen joined them in the observation chamber, carrying a tablet filled with manifests. "Fleet Singer, I wanted to personally explain some of the gifts. I know they might seem strange to your people." Azure Wind tilted her head in the gesture of attentive listening. "Please, Dr. Chen, help me understand." "Well," Dr. Chen began, scrolling through her list, "the children of Luna Colony sent 10,000 hand-drawn pictures. Each one shows Earth and Zephyria as friends. They wanted your children to have them." Azure Wind felt her bioluminescent patterns pulse with surprise. "Your young ones know of us?" "Every human child in the solar system learned about the Zephyrians who saved Dr. Chen," Admiral Vasquez said. "It's being taught in schools as a lesson about kindness and courage. Your actions are inspiring a generation of human children." The implications of this struck Azure Wind like a harmonic shockwave. One simple act of compassion had somehow become part of human educational curriculum. Their rescue of one scientist was being told as a story to billions of human children. Dr. Chen continued with her list. "The master chefs of Venus have sent recipes and ingredients for every type of human cuisine. They want to cook for your people, to share the foods that we consider expressions of love and community. The Vienna Philharmonic brought their instruments and want to perform concerts blending human and Zephyrian musical traditions," Admiral Vasquez added. "They spent months learning to incorporate your harmonic communication patterns into their compositions." Azure Wind's confusion only deepened. "But why music? Why food? These seem like gifts for establishing permanent relationships, not simply expressing gratitude." The 2 humans exchanged glances, and Dr. Chen spoke carefully. Fleet Singer, I think you might be misunderstanding human nature. When we're grateful, we don't just want to say thank you and move on. We want to build lasting bonds with those who showed us kindness. Your rescue of Dr. Chen wasn't just a transaction to us, Admiral Vasquez explained. It was the beginning of what we hope will be a friendship between our peoples. Over the following days, Azure Wind found herself serving as a cultural liaison, helping her people understand the bewildering generosity of their human visitors. The gifts kept coming, each more elaborate than the last. The humans had brought samples of every plant species from Earth, Mars, and the agricultural colonies. Not just samples, entire mobile greenhouses designed to help these species adapt to Zephyrian soil and atmosphere. They were literally sharing their entire agricultural heritage. The University of New Cambridge had sent a complete digital library containing every work of human literature, poetry, philosophy, and scientific research that wasn't classified. Billions of documents representing the accumulated knowledge and creativity of the entire human species, but perhaps most touching were the personal gifts. The grandmother from New Tokyo who had sent her flower seeds had included a handwritten letter, explaining that these were seeds from her family's garden, passed down through 12 generations. She wanted the Zephyrians to have them because people who save lives deserve to see beauty grow. Azure Wind brought this letter to Elder Harmony, who read it through the translator with growing amazement. This human woman is giving us her family's heritage plants because we helped one of their scientists? It appears so, Elder, and she is not alone. We have received personal gifts from millions of individual humans. Artwork, musical instruments, family recipes, handcrafted items, even digital recordings of human families thanking us. Elder Harmony's patterns pulsed with the deep contemplation that marked his species' most profound thinking. Azure Wind, I am beginning to understand something about these humans that troubles me. What troubles you, Elder? Their capacity for gratitude appears to be unlimited. There seems to be no action too small to merit their overwhelming response. No kindness that they will not repay tenfold. Azure Wind felt a chill of understanding. You think this could be dangerous? I think this could change everything, Elder Harmony replied. A species that responds to kindness with such overwhelming generosity is either the most wonderful or the most terrifying neighbor imaginable. The cultural exchange programs had begun in earnest. Human teachers were working with Zephyrian educators to establish permanent schools where both species could learn from each other. Human doctors were sharing their medical technology while learning about Zephyrian biotechnology. Human artists were collaborating with Zephyrian biosculptors to create entirely new forms of living art. But what struck Azure Wind most profoundly was the attitude of the individual humans. She had spent time with hundreds of them now, from admirals to farmers to children who had somehow convinced their parents to let them join the mission. Without exception, they all expressed the same sentiment: gratitude for what the Zephyrians had done for Dr. Chen. A human child named Tommy from the Mars colonies had given her a drawing he had made of her bioship. At the bottom, in the uncertain handwriting of the very young, he had written, "Thank you for saving Dr. Sarah. She is nice and you are nice too." Azure Wind had kept the drawing, studying it during her rest periods. The simple crayon mark somehow captured something essential about human nature, their tendency to see kindness as something that created bonds, that demanded reciprocal kindness, that built bridges between strangers. On the 5th day of the cultural exchange, Dr. Chen requested a private meeting with Azure Wind. They met in one of the Harmony's smaller chambers, designed to accommodate both human and Zephyrian physiologies. "I wanted to ask you something," Dr. Chen said, her voice carrying the hesitant tones humans used when addressing sensitive subjects. "Do we seem insane to you? All of this," she gestured toward the fleet visible through the chamber's windows, "for one rescue?" Azure Wind considered the question carefully. "Dr. Chen, your people have puzzled us greatly. We saved one life and you responded as if we had saved your entire species. By the logic of most galactic civilizations, yes. This response is insane." Dr. Chen's expression showed disappointment, but Azure Wind continued. "However, I have begun to understand that humans do not operate by the logic of most galactic civilizations. You operate by a different principle, that kindness creates obligation, that gratitude demands expression, that bonds formed through compassion should be strengthened rather than forgotten. Azure Wind's pattern shifted to show deep respect. Dr. Chen, in a galaxy often marked by indifference and calculation, your species' insanity is perhaps the most sane thing I have ever witnessed. Dr. Chen smiled, and Azure Wind realized she was beginning to find human facial expressions quite beautiful in their simplicity and directness. There's something else, Dr. Chen said. Admiral Vasquez didn't want to overwhelm you with this immediately, but this mission isn't just about saying thank you. The human government has authorized me to extend a formal invitation. What kind of invitation? We want to establish a permanent friendship between our species. Cultural exchanges, scientific cooperation, mutual assistance treaties. We want the Zephyrians to become humanity's first true allies in the galaxy. Azure Wind felt her entire body pulse with surprise. All of this, because we rescued you, because you showed us that there are people in this galaxy worth being friends with, Dr. Chen replied. Because you proved that kindness still exists among the stars. 5 years after the arrival of the Gratitude Fleet, Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the gardens of New Harmony, the first joint human Zephyrian colony established on the border between their territories. The Zephyrian seed she had carried for so long had grown into a magnificent tree, its blue glowing flowers creating patterns of light that were both beautiful and somehow musical. The colony was everything she had dreamed it could be and more. Human geometric architecture blended seamlessly with Zephyrian biostructures, creating buildings that were both functional and alive. Children of both species played together in parks where earth roses grew alongside Zephyrian harmony vines, their laughter mixing with the gentle songs of the bio trees. Dr. Chen, came a familiar voice behind her. She turned to see fleet singer Azure Wind through leaves approaching, her graceful form now enhanced with some of the cybernetic interfaces that had become popular among Zephyrians working closely with humans. The council meeting is about to begin. Sarah nodded but didn't move immediately. Azure Wind, do you ever wonder if we did the right thing? Starting all this? The Zephyrians' patterns pulsed with gentle amusement. Sarah, why would you doubt what has grown from that simple rescue? Sarah gestured toward the colony around them, but her expression remained thoughtful. Sometimes I wonder if we forced this friendship. If we pushed too hard, too fast. The galaxy has changed so much since the Gratitude Fleet. It was true. The human Zephyrian alliance had created ripples throughout galactic civilization that were still spreading. Some species had embraced the new model of cooperation, based on genuine affection rather than calculated benefit. The peaceful Dulari had established cultural exchange programs with the artistic vegan colonies. The scholarly Kepler Union had begun sharing research freely with species that had previously been considered competitors, but others had reacted with suspicion or outright hostility. The Andromedan Empire had declared the human Zephyrian alliance a threat to galactic stability. The Centauri Collective, despite Ambassador Kelthera's initial concerns, had actually tried to weaponize gratitude, offering elaborate gifts as manipulative tools rather than genuine expressions of appreciation. Sarah, Azure Wind said gently, do you know what happened in the Rigel system last month? Sarah shook her head. A Dulari transport suffered critical engine failure in deep space. They sent out a distress call, not expecting much. The Rigel system is controlled by the Andromedan Empire, and the Andromedans have no treaty obligations to help civilian Dulari vessels. Azure Wind's pattern shifted to show quiet pride. 3 ships responded to that call. An Andromedan patrol vessel, a human merchant ship, and one of our bio ships. They worked together to save 200 Dulari civilians, asking for nothing in return. Sarah felt a warmth spreading through her chest. The Andromedans helped, even though they've been so critical of our alliance? The ship's captain sent a message afterward, Azure Wind continued. She said that watching the human Zephyrian friendship had made her reconsider what was possible between species. She said she wanted to try being the kind of person who saves lives instead of just protecting territory. They walked together toward the council chamber, passing through the colony's main plaza where the daily market was in full swing. Human merchants sold earth-grown vegetables alongside Zephyrian harmony fruits. Children ran through fountains that sang with bioacoustic melodies. Elderly humans sat in meditation circles with ancient Zephyrians, sharing philosophies and stories across the vast differences in their cultures. The galaxy is changing, Sarah said, but not everyone is happy about it. Change is never comfortable for everyone, Azure Wind agreed. But consider this. 5 years ago, how many species in the galaxy would risk their own safety to save strangers? How many would give freely without expecting payment? How many would choose cooperation over competition when both options were available? Sarah thought about it. Before the Gratitude Fleet, the galactic standard for interspecies relations had been cautious neutrality at best, calculated exploitation at worst. Species helped each other only when treaties demanded it or when payment was guaranteed. Now, Azure Wind continued, we have the Dulari-Vegan Cultural Initiative, the Kepler Proxima Research Sharing Agreement, the Peaceful Response Coalition that includes 17 different species committed to humanitarian aid, the Andromedan captain who chooses to save lives. They entered the council chamber, where representatives from across the galaxy had gathered for the 5th Annual Harmony Conference. The meeting had started as a simple celebration of human-Zephyrian friendship, but had evolved into something much larger, a forum for species interested in exploring new models of galactic cooperation. Admiral Vasquez, now serving as humanity's ambassador for cooperative development, was presenting the latest statistics. This year, we've documented over 3,000 instances of interspecies humanitarian aid with no expectation of compensation. 47 new cultural exchange programs have been established. 8 different species have created their own versions of gratitude fleets to honor those who have helped them. Sarah smiled at that last statistic. The Dulari had sent a convoy of art ships to thank the Vegan colonies for sharing agricultural technology. The scholarly Kepler Union had established permanent research stations to help primitive species develop spaceflight capabilities. Even some Centauri business collectives had begun including gratitude bonuses in their contracts, extra payments to species who exceeded expectations. Not every attempt had been successful. The Thalarian Empire's Gratitude Armada had been interpreted as a threat by its recipients, leading to a minor diplomatic crisis. Some species simply couldn't understand why anyone would give something without expecting equal value in return. But for every failure, there were 3 successes. For every species that rejected the new model, 2 others embraced it. The most significant development, Admiral Vasquez continued, is the establishment of the Galactic Mutual Aid Network. 43 species have committed to providing assistance to any civilization facing natural disasters, technological failures, or humanitarian crises, regardless of political affiliation or economic benefit. Elder Harmony's bioprojection pulsed with deep satisfaction. This is what we hoped would grow from that first small seed of kindness. Sarah looked around the chamber at the representatives of dozens of species, all gathered to discuss how they could better help each other, how they could express gratitude more meaningfully, how they could build friendships that transcended economic necessity. Ambassador Kelthera of the Centauri Collective stood to address the assembly. In the 5 years since her first visit, she had become an unlikely advocate for the new model of cooperation, though she still insisted on measuring everything in economic terms. The collective has completed its analysis of the gratitude-based cooperation model, she announced. While economically irrational in the short term, the long-term benefits include reduced conflict costs, increased innovation through knowledge sharing, and improved stability across all participating regions. She paused, her forearms moving in what Sarah had learned was the Centauri equivalent of embarrassed admission. The collective formally acknowledges that the human Zephyrian approach has generated superior outcomes. Compared to traditional transaction-based diplomacy, the chamber erupted in musical harmonies from the Zephyrians, applause from the humans, and various expressions of approval from the other species present. After the formal session ended, Sarah found herself alone with Dr. Chen, not herself but Dr. Maria Chen, her younger cousin who had followed in her footsteps to become a xenobiologist specializing in interspecies cooperation studies. "Cousin Sarah," Maria said, "I've been researching the pre-gratitude fleet period for my dissertation. Do you know what strikes me most about the old system?" "What's that?" "How much energy species spent protecting themselves from each other instead of helping each other grow. The amount of resources dedicated to mutual suspicion instead of mutual support." Sarah nodded, thinking about the human military budgets that had been redirected to cultural exchange programs, the Zephyrian bioships that now carried teachers and artists instead of just cargo, The dozens of species that had discovered they could accomplish more together than they ever could alone. Maria, can I tell you something I've never told anyone else? Of course. Sometimes I dream about that escape pod, about floating in the darkness, certain I was going to die alone and forgotten. And I think about how different the galaxy might be if the Zephyrians had made a different choice that day. Maria looked puzzled. Different how? If they had decided I wasn't worth the risk. If they had calculated that saving one human scientist wouldn't benefit them enough to justify the danger. If they had just left me there. Sarah looked out through the chamber's biotransparent walls at the thriving colony beyond, at the children of two species playing together, at the adults of dozens of species working together to build something new. All of this exists because one group of beings decided that life was worth saving, even when they had nothing to gain from it. The entire course of galactic history changed because some people chose to be kind. Maria smiled. And because other people chose to be grateful. As the day ended and the various